on you because I just got my American visa for 10 years 3 hours ago. So, I do hope,
American house for
knowing how our relationships develop, I'm not sure whether that's going to be my last visa, but I must say that out of all European consulates that issue visas to Ukrainian citizens, American experience is by far the best. You've improved a lot. I remember myself standing here in minus 10 degrees weather about 6 or 7 years ago, and it's no longer the case. Now the application is much better, and I can even understand about 25% of what's written on the website. We have a number of questions today to the distinguished guests that we have, and so let me ask you to move to the podium, and Ambassador Pola Dobryanski, Adrian Karatnycky, and John Herbst, who we all know from wherever you like, who we all know from the discussions on U.S.-Ukraine relations. You've been all active in different roles. Let me start with a memory of a good Gorbachev joke, which was about a journalist who asks Gorbachev to describe the state of the Soviet economy in one word, and Gorbachev says good. And then he asks to describe the state of the Soviet economy in 2 words, and Gorbachev says not good. And so let me ask you to describe what is the state of the US-Ukraine relations with regard to enormous expectations that Ukrainians have with the Budapest Memorandum, with the Russian aggression, with regards to expectation of the US as a key security partner of Ukraine. Where do you think we stand right now? What's happening right now? And do you think that the current state of relations is putting us in the place where we should be at the moment? Let me give you the privilege of choosing who will be the first to intervene.
He's looking at you, John.
You're wired. Okay, that's good.
I haven't switched on my...
Oh, you have.
my
So.
Okay. One, the overall state of U.S.-Ukrainian relations is good. Two, we provide significant support for Ukraine, both in the defense and in the economic areas. 3, the Russian aggression against Ukraine, the seizure of Crimea, the war on Donbass, is a flagrant violation of the Budapest Memorandum, and the Americans' response has not been sufficient in connection with its assurances regarding Ukraine's territorial integrity. Because 4, while I give President Obama high marks for his policy on sanctions, he has not been clear in defining the danger that comes from the Kremlin. It's a danger not just to Ukraine, but to the post-Cold War order in Europe. When a nuclear superpower changes borders by force, it is by definition a global security problem, not a regional European crisis. And a global security problem requires American leadership to fix or to manage. So that's a very serious failing. And as a result of that failing, we come to the final point, which is that while the United States has provided some important security assistance to Ukraine, especially in the area of training, and especially with the provision of counter-battery radar for missiles, very important step, the administration has been reluctant to provide Ukraine with defensive lethal equipment, which would certainly make it much harder and much more painful for the Kremlin to expand its aggression against Ukraine. So I would say from inadequate strategic reasonings, reasoning comes a not quite adequate policy.
Would you like to?
Yes, I'd like, what I'd like to say is that as John has described the overall US-Ukraine environment, I think we can say that Ukraine has fallen off the front pages and off the short attention span of many of our leaders. At the same time, if we look at how the US political process is likely to evolve over the course of the next months in our election year, given the rather unique positions staked out by one of the most prominent candidates, Donald Trump, I think that Ukraine and the security architecture of Europe and the security architecture of Eastern Europe will become a key issue of debate and discussion, and Ukraine will, simply by the dynamic of the election campaign in the United States, become front and center. If you look at the demographics of states that are swing states in national elections, places like Ohio, places like occasionally Illinois, places like Pennsylvania, states that can shift on a matter of 10, 15, 20,000 votes. These are places with large concentrations of the Ukrainian diaspora and a large concentration of the Polish diaspora and other East European diasporas. Donald Trump has been flippant and dismissive of the importance of NATO and of the US commitment to NATO in recent comments. And I believe that if he becomes the candidate of the Republican Party, and that is not yet by any means a certainty, that this issue will be an issue that will be debated because it is a major security commitment of the United States. And secondly, it is a major issue of concern for small but highly motivated constituencies that could tip the election in key states. In 1992, I had the privilege of helping the Clinton campaign when I was partisan. I am not partisan today in my life, but I worked for the American Trade Union Movement, and I wrote a memo called sort of the demographic factor in European demographic, East European American demographic factor in the 1992 election, which pointed out all of the issues that I summarized in my preamble. That memo, along with the work of a number of my colleagues, was very influential in getting Bill Clinton to adopt early on his commitment to NATO membership for the East European states at a time when the Bush 1 administration was a little cautious about, thought that it might not be prudent, to use a term of art of the president, to advance this issue early on in the post-communist collapse period after the collapse of communism in Central and Eastern Europe. And I think we have an opportunity to revive that kind of a debate if Mr. Trump faces Hillary Clinton as a candidate. And whatever is the case, I think Mr. Trump's, I would say, unusually exceptional view of security arrangements in the post-Cold War and in the European North Atlantic theater will make this issue resonate both in the Republican Party debates in the next few months as the primaries continue, and should he become the nominee in the general election.
Well,
May I answer the question too?
I got a tougher one for you.
No. I want to, and then you can throw a tough one. Because I'd like to first answer the question. I think that the relationship is good. But I'd also add, I think I would define it also as a strategic partnership. And even though the relationship has had its ebbs and flows, depending on what's going on, it's a strategic partnership. What does that mean? Ukraine matters. It matters. You are located at the crossroads of Europe and Asia. You're a big country, and you matter. What happens here matters in terms of peace, stability, and security for not just your country, but Europe at large. So I would start with that. It does matter. Adrian is right in saying that you're facing competition in terms of where this issue is in terms of the United States. But having said that, I don't think that diminishes the commitment now and the commitment long-term to seeing Ukraine fulfill its objectives, its goals, its crucial mission. In terms of the Russian aggression that you are confronted with, On that, I'm in agreement with John. Our Congress, by the way, Republicans and Democrats have supported providing Ukraine with its request for military assistance, specifically, and the specific requests that have been made. The administration, I would categorize it, has opted to take a more incremental approach on this. My own taste would be fulfill what you had asked for. So we have a difference of view between our legislative and executive branch on this. But I don't think that diminishes the key point, which is, again, there's a commitment here to helping Ukraine thwart that aggression and to regain fully its territory and to push back Russian troops and armament across the border and have respect for the Budapest Memorandum. Secondly, economic assistance is a key issue. You are in the middle of trying to reform. When people came out in the streets in the time of the Maidan, the request was for association with the EU and also eradicate corruption, let's implement reforms. And towards that end, we are also very committed. I think it was very significant, the fact that Ukraine was able to reschedule its debt last year. And in this case, the United States at all levels, and no partisanship on this, was supporting that effort. As you may know, the only piece that hasn't been rescheduled is from the East. Russia hasn't joined in this collective effort to help Ukraine economically move forward. But having said that, I also think as you have opportunities, there are challenges. And yesterday I was here and had the chance, there's a number of you I see in the audience again who were here yesterday, and we talked about the role of civil society in ensuring that there is a strong rule of law, not just good legislation, but the actual enforcement, and ensuring that there's enforcement at all levels, because that's what's going to make you strong. So my answer is that we have a strong relationship that has endured. It's good. There are challenges to it, but there are opportunities as well to it. And one last point on this, and that is, we have our elections. I also see it as an opportunity. I think Adrian is correct. It provides an opportunity for Ukraine to be aggressive, to make its case, but I also think it has to also demonstrate that it's not only professing goals and objectives, but actually taking the tangible actions for reform that need to be taken here on the ground.
Well, here's a tougher one. We have about 10,000 families that are affected by this war in a way that cannot be reversed. And that puts some very strong, that forces them to make some very strong wording on the causes of all this. So the question is, do you think that memorandums like Budapest Memorandum are gone? Do you think that any future guarantee is not credible anymore? And do you think that Ukraine can just, tear that, page from its history and say, okay, that didn't work, that was probably a mistake, we should have played that differently, we don't know how, but we probably should have. Do you think it's a failure?
I would answer your question this way. First, you asked if it's gone. I will say to you directly that in the United States, there are different views on this. Some lawyers say that there is the Budapest Memorandum, but is it binding? And that, seriously, there have been some who've written on this and will argue that case. My view is it is binding. I'm with John. John mentioned this in his opening remark. It is binding. Why is it binding? We, the United States, signed on to the Budapest Memorandum. Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons. and in giving up its nuclear weapons for protection of its territorial sovereignty and integrity. That's very serious. I wrote an op-ed that appeared in the USA Today, and the title of it was, "Ukraine Regrets Giving Up Its Nuclear Weapons." So, there are three issues at play. It does matter. It matters not only because Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons, but secondly, and its territorial integrity has been not respected. Secondly, it matters because the aggression that took place not only has a direct impact on Ukraine and the 1.5 to 2 million internally displaced persons, and there was a gentleman here yesterday who stood up very eloquently and asked and said, am I going to be able to vote? Am I going to get my home back? So you're right. So it's not only here, though, it is also about Europe, Europe at large. If Ukraine is not stable and secure and it's violated, this sends a signal, I think, for the rest of the continent. But it's not just only this region, it has global ramifications. And the global ramification is countries in Asia look at the question, what does this mean for us? The term extended deterrence. Can we count on our allies and friends to come to our aid when our territorial integrity is violated? You may know that there are island disputes in Asia that affect many countries. And finally, because this next week is the week of the nuclear non-proliferation, I think it underscores the point how crucial this topic is for that issue. And in terms of respect, if you want to support and you feel strong about nuclear non-proliferation, then in that case, this is a violation of it. And you have to question then some who profess to support it and have not. In this case, the violator of the Budapest Memorandum.
So do I understand it right that for those who suffer or for those who have suffered, this may be the point when the U.S. reputation at large is formed, and they say, okay, well, they still have a debate whether it's binding or not. So we can't count on the U.S. government in future if we are to give up some of our privileges for the promise of security.
Well, I'm going to